"Let the boy eat," she whispered, pushing the tin plate back across the table before Jed Colton could stop her. "I already ate my share." He knew she was lying. He had watched her plate all through supper, and she had not touched a single bite of that cornbread, not one spoonful of the beans he'd cooked over the fire himself. Her boy, no older than 6, dug into the food like a starved dog, and she sat there smiling at him as though her own stomach wasn't hollow as a dry well. Jed set down his fork. He'd ridden into that stretch of Wyoming territory 3 days back, looking for nothing more than work and quiet, and instead he'd found a woman named Mary Ellis living in a lean-to shack with her son, a milk goat, and not much else. Her husband had been dead 8 months, thrown from a horse out on the flats, and since then she'd been scraping by on what she could grow and what she could trade. The roof leaked. The fence was falling. And still she smiled like a woman with plenty, which was the thing that got under Jed's skin the most, because he knew hunger when he saw it. He'd worn it himself once, a long time ago, back before the war took his brother and left him with nothing but a busted-up ranch and a name nobody in his family wanted anymore. "You didn't eat," he said. "I ate plenty," Mary said, not looking at him, gathering the boy's empty plate like the conversation was finished. Her hands were red and cracked from washing clothes for the Hendersons 2 towns over, work she rode 6 miles each way to do. Jed had seen the calluses on her palms when she'd handed him a cup of coffee that morning. Coffee she'd stretched so thin it was barely more than warm water with a memory of beans in it. "Ma'am, I've been sitting at tables my whole life. I know an empty plate that never got touched." She turned to him then, and there was something fierce in her eyes, something that dared him to say another word about it. "Mr. Colton, you're a guest in my house, such as it is. I'll thank you not to comment on how I choose to feed my own family." The boy, whose name was Tommy, looked between them with the wide, careful eyes of a child who has learned to read a room before he can read a book. "Mama says she's not hungry on account of her stomach being poorly," he said, matter of fact, the way children say things that aren't meant to be secrets but are. Mary's face went the color of a fresh bruise. Jed said nothing more that night, but he lay awake in the barn where she'd insisted he sleep, listening to the wind rattle the loose boards, and he thought about the particular kind of pride that made a woman go hungry, rather than admit she couldn't feed herself and her child both. He had come to that stretch of land looking to buy back a piece of his family's old ranch, 20 miles east, sold off after his brother's death, when Jed had been too broken to fight for it. He had the money now, saved dollar by dollar working other men's cattle for 6 years, and he had a plan, simple as a fence line. Buy the land, rebuild the house, live out his days without owing anybody anything and without anybody owing him. He had not planned on stopping at a run-down homestead to ask directions and finding a woman with cracked hands and a hollow stomach, and a boy who called her brave without knowing that's what the word meant. He stayed a week, though he told himself it was only because his horse had thrown a shoe and the nearest smith was 3 days' ride. He mended her fence. He fixed the leak in the roof with tin he found stacked behind the barn, rusted but serviceable. He shot 2 rabbits and skinned them, and did not say a word when Mary served him the larger portions and took the smallest cut for herself. Only this time, he made sure Tommy served the plates, so she couldn't slip her food onto anyone else's without being seen. "You don't have to do all this," she told him on the 3rd evening, watching him hammer the last nail into the fence post. The sun was going down orange and low, throwing long shadows across the dirt yard, and there was a softness to her voice that hadn't been there before, like something in her had started to thaw. "I know I don't have to," Jed said. "Man does what needs doing when he's got 2 hands and time on them." Most men would have ridden on by now. Smith in town would have fixed your horse's shoe in an afternoon if you'd asked around. He looked at her a long moment, hammer resting against his palm. "Maybe I wasn't in such a hurry." She looked away first, back toward the house where Tommy was chasing the goat around the yard, laughing the kind of laugh that only children have left in them after hard years. "You shouldn't say things like that to a widow, Mr. Colton. Folks talk." "Let them talk. I never much cared what folks in town thought of me. That's because you don't have to live here after you ride off." There was no bitterness in it, only fact, plain as the dirt under their boots. She'd been left behind by the war of gossip that follows a woman alone, the kind of talk that decided she must have done something to drive her husband to ruin, or that she was looking for a new man to take her in before her husband was even settled in the ground. Jed had heard some of it himself in town, buying rope and nails, men at the mercantile counter saying her name like it tasted bad in their mouths, and he'd wanted to put his fist through something, but had held his tongue and bought his supplies and left. That night, after Tommy was put to bed on the little cot by the stove, Mary sat on the porch step with a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, and Jed came and sat beside her, close enough that their arms nearly touched, not close enough to mean anything improper. "My husband wasn't a bad man," she said, unprompted, staring out at the dark shapes of the hills. "Folks think because I don't cry for him in town I didn't love him. I loved him plenty. He just wasn't built for this land. Some men aren't. It chews them up slow and then all at once." "I'm sorry," Jed said, and meant it. "Don't be sorry for me, Mr. Colton. I've had enough sorry to last 3 lifetimes. What I need is—" She stopped herself, pressing her lips together like she'd caught herself before saying something she'd regret. "What do you need?" he asked, quiet, not pushing, just asking. She was silent a long moment, then, "I need this winter to not kill my boy. That's all I let myself need anymore." Jed felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept locked up tight since his brother died and left him alone in the world with nothing but debt, and a name that made men look at him sideways in town, on account of his father's gambling and the shame that trailed after it like smoke after a grass fire. He knew what it was to want only one thing and to be too proud to say it out loud to anybody. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, "and I don't want you to take it as charity because it isn't charity, it's just truth. I've got money saved. Enough to buy back my family's old spread 20 miles from here. Was going to do it alone. Live out there by myself, work the land, keep to myself." "That sounds like a fine plan," she said carefully. "It was. Until I sat at your table and watched you starve yourself in front of your own child so he wouldn't go without." Mary stood up so fast the shawl slipped off one shoulder. "I don't need your pity, Mr. Colton, and I certainly don't need your money." "I'm not offering money." He stood too, and there was nothing soft in his voice now, only a kind of steady certainty that made her stop moving toward the door. "I'm offering a hand at building something. You've got a boy who needs a fed belly and a roof that don't leak, and I've got a stretch of land and no earthly idea how to make a house feel like a home, on account of I've never had one that felt that way since I was a boy myself. Seems to me, 2 broken things might make one whole one, if we're willing to try." "You're asking me to marry you." Her voice was flat with disbelief, like the words didn't fit in her mouth right. "I'm asking you to consider it not tonight, not because you're desperate and I happen to be riding by, because I think you're the kind of woman who'd rather starve than beg, and I think I've got something to offer that isn't begging or pity. It's just 2 people helping each other not go under." She didn't answer him that night. She went inside without a word, and Jed sat alone on the porch step a long while, feeling foolish, feeling like he'd said too much too soon to a woman who had every reason not to trust a stranger's promises. He'd seen enough men make big promises and break them small, piece by piece, until a woman was left with nothing but the wreckage. He didn't blame her for the silence. The next morning she was cool toward him, polite but distant, handing him coffee without meeting his eyes, and Jed figured he'd overstepped and ruined a good week's worth of honest work with a fool proposal spoken too plain and too fast. He fixed the last of the fence in silence and told her he'd be riding out that afternoon, horse being fit to travel again, and she nodded and said that was fine, and thanked him kindly for all he'd done, formal as a stranger. He was tightening the cinch on his saddle when Tommy came running out from behind the barn, breathless, clutching something in his small fist. "Mr. Colton! Mr. Colton, wait!" Jed crouched down to the boy's level. "What is it, son?" Tommy opened his hand. Inside was a smooth river stone painted crude with what looked like berry juice, a shape that might have been meant as a horse or might have been meant as nothing at all, just a boy's private art. "Mama says you're leaving. I wanted you to have something so you'd remember us." Something in Jed's chest went tight and raw. He took the stone like it was made of gold. "I'm not likely to forget you, Tommy. Not for anything." "Are you leaving because Mama made you mad?" "No," Jed said. "Your mama didn't make me mad. Your mama's about the bravest person I ever met. And I said something to her I shouldn't have said so quick, and now I reckon she thinks I'm just another man who talks big and rides off." Tommy considered this with the seriousness only a child can manage. "You could stay and tell her you meant it." Jed almost laughed, except there wasn't much laughing in him at that moment, only a kind of ache. He looked past the boy toward the house, and there in the doorway stood Mary, arms crossed against the morning chill, watching them both. She hadn't come close enough to hear the words, but something in her face had shifted since the coffee that morning. Something uncertain and searching. Jed stood and led his horse toward the house instead of away from it, Tommy trotting along beside him. And when he reached the porch, he didn't waste time with careful words. "I meant what I said last night," he told her. "Every word of it. I'm not a man who says things he doesn't mean, and I'm sorry if I said it wrong or said it too soon, but I won't take it back just because it scared you." "It didn't scare me," Mary said, though her voice shook just enough to betray the lie. "Then what did it do?" She was quiet a long moment, looking somewhere past his shoulder, out toward the hills where the morning light was climbing gold over the ridgeline. "It made me want to say yes," she said finally, so soft he almost missed it. "And wanting something that badly after losing everything once already, that's the thing that scares me, Mr. Colton. Not you, not your offer. Just how much I want to believe it's real." "It's real," he said. "I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm offering you hard work and a roof, and a man who'll never let your boy go hungry while you sit there smiling and starving so he don't notice. That's all I've got. That's all I know how to give." Mary's eyes filled, and she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth like she could hold the feeling in by force, but it came anyway, quiet and shaking, and Tommy looked up at his mother with worry creasing his small face until she knelt and pulled him close and said, "I'm all right, baby. I'm all right. These are the good kind of tears." They did not marry that week, or even that month. Jed rode out to see the sheriff and the land office and settled the business of buying back his family's spread, and he wrote to Mary twice, plain letters about fences and cattle prices and small things. Nothing flowery because he wasn't a man for flowery words, but he signed each one the same way, thinking of you and the boy. Always. And Mary wrote back, telling him about the goat's new kid and Tommy losing his first tooth and the roof holding steady through a hard rain. And somewhere in those letters, without either of them naming it plain, a kind of promise took root. By the time the first snow came, Jed had a house standing again on his family's old land, modest but sound, with a stove that drew right and a roof that didn't leak a drop, and he rode the 20 miles back to Mary's homestead with a wagon and an offer that was, by then, no longer a question but a certainty between them both. "I'm not asking you to save me," Mary told him, standing in the yard with Tommy's hand in hers, the last of the autumn light falling gold across the frost-touched grass. "I want you to know that. I'm not marrying you because I'm drowning and you threw me a rope." "I know that," Jed said. "I'm marrying you because you're the first man I've met since my husband died who looked at an empty plate and cared more about why it was empty than about minding his own business." "Well," Jed said, and there was the ghost of a smile on his face now, the first easy one she'd seen. From him in all their weeks of knowing each other. "Seems to me a man ought to mind an empty plate, especially when the woman across from him is too proud to say she's hungry." They married in December, in front of the little church in town, with a handful of neighbors who had once whispered about. Mary now standing witness to something that looked, for all the world, like the beginning of a life instead of the end of one. Tommy stood between them at the altar, insisting on holding both their hands at once, and the preacher laughed and said he supposed that was fitting, since it seemed the boy had done as much to bring the two of them together as anyone. That first winter in the rebuilt house, Jed watched Mary set the table every evening, and he watched her eat, really eat, without pretending, without pushing food toward Tommy that she needed. Herself, because there was enough now, finally. Enough for all three of them, and nobody at that table would ever again have to choose between their own hunger and someone else's. Some nights she'd catch him watching her over the lamplight and ask what he was staring at, and he'd just shake his head and say, "Nothing. Just glad to see you eat, is all." And she'd laugh, soft and easy. A woman who had learned that love, real love, was not a grand thing spoken, loud in front of crowds, but a quiet thing that showed up at the supper table every single night and made sure nobody went without. Years later, when Tommy was near grown and there were two more children at that table besides, he would tell the story sometimes, the way children do, about the winter his mother gave away her food and a stranger noticed, and how that noticing had built the whole rest of their lives. He never got every detail right in the telling, the way memory smooths and changes things over time. But he always ended it the same way. The one part he never forgot, the one line his mother had whispered that had started everything. "Let the boy eat.